buddy, watch this.
Yeah, clearly there have been some misses when it comes to stealth in Hearthstone, and really there aren't that many strong stealth cards in the game, but maybe we'll fix that with this video. This is our latest custom card competition. You guys designed some incredible stealth cards. I've picked my 10 favorite, and we're going to talk about them starting right now. Up first here, let's take a look at the Goblin Lockpicker from Fantastics, a 2-mana neutral 2/2 battlecry, give a taunt minion stealth. So this is a cool card for a couple reasons. First off, I like that it borrows the artwork from the new Dollar on Ice. That's pretty cool to put him into a card here. But beyond that, I really like this battlecry because there's a couple ways you can use it, right? I think the thing that comes to mind for a lot of people is, okay, I've got a minion I want to protect on board and I give it stealth, but I can only do it if it's taunt. So it's this kind of really powerful thing, but it's restricted. So for instance, maybe you can't give your Malygos stealth and do shenanigans unless perhaps you give your Malygos taunt somehow, and then things start to really snowball, and creatively you can start to build cool ideas around this. But more generally speaking, right, like there may be a taunt minion that has a positive effect that you just want to protect. Beyond that, maybe you have a taunt that you don't want it to have taunt anymore, because once it gets stealth, your opponent can no longer attack it even though it has taunt. So maybe you need to protect it. Maybe there's some reason the game has shifted and you want to force your opponent to attack something else, or whatever it is, right? We don't know, but there are ways to build around this mechanic. And then beyond that, because this doesn't say friendly minion, you can also give stealth to your opponent's taunts. So in a way, this is like a silence for taunt minions of your opponents that has some extra potential utility on your own side of the board as well. So it's a bit like Shield Breaker, for instance. You can just silence their taunt and you can go face. So a couple different kinds of decks and ideas here that might want to use this card. So that to me makes it feel like an incredibly realistic Hearthstone card. There are shenanigans possible at a base level. Maybe it just kind of looks average in a lot of ways. Doesn't always make sense, but then the gears start turning. You start picking some locks, and suddenly a card like this does something cool and finds a home in a deck. Moving on here, let's take a look at Shadow Meld from Faroon. This is a 1-mana hunter spell, and it has some incredibly, insanely cool artwork. I just love the artwork here. And it reads, give a friendly minion at the start of your turn, gain stealth. So in your mind, you might be saying, whoa, Regis, like comparing this to Conceal of old, for instance, is like 1,000 times worse than Conceal. Conceal was a 1-mana spell that gave all friendly minions stealth, and that was really good to the extent that it got nerfed, right? Conceal actually got nerfed because it was too scary and limited design space. But Shadow Meld here comes along, and it's not nearly as design space limiting, right? Because it's only a single minion, and the effect is delayed. So you do, in fact, give your opponent the ability to perhaps react to the stealth. So from a design standpoint, this one feels a lot more fair. And you might say, oh, well, if it's so much weaker than old Conceal, it would never get played. Well, maybe, but remember that Hunter is different than Rogue. And for instance, something like, say, a Scavenging Hyena with stealth could be absolutely insane. Scavenging Hyena is already good, but if you can keep it alive for a turn, give it stealth, and then start to go crazy with it, might get even better. But there are some downsides. You got to run a 1-mana kind of utility spell, and you're not playing other big minions, and you're restricting your deck's build a little bit. So one of those cards that potentially makes a cool opportunity, but isn't always inherently good or obviously good. That's good design, good balance, and beyond that, the name here and the artwork, absolutely wonderful. So pretty cool little card. All right, moving on, we have Abigail, the Doll's Hand here from Mage, Old Desert, 4-mana 3/2 stealth for Warlock. Whenever you discard a minion, summon a 1/1 copy of it. I love this card because it combines like Morose from One Night in Karazhan and something like Dollmaster Dorian, thematically dealing with dolls here. That's a really nice fit. But it's also got discard synergies. You guys know I love discard Warlock style cards. And I like the idea here that if you build your deck in a nice way, say with like high value death rattles, things like Mechanical Whelp, you can summon that onto the board. If you're lucky enough, or in a controlled way, thanks to cards from Rostakon's Rumble, you can maybe controlled discard the right target, and suddenly you've got yourself a cool little swing turn or a big board that shouldn't otherwise be possible thanks to some discard synergy options. So another card that opens up a lot of opportunities. It does really cool stuff, thematically fits Hearthstone really nicely. So yeah, this one checks all the boxes for me. Up next here, let's take a look at Double Agent from Quasi Spatial, a 2-mana rogue secret, and it reads, after your opponent plays a stealth minion, take control of it. Now, I know some of you are going to say, oh, rogue secrets are rotated out, whatever. We're not thinking about this in a specific instance of a standard format rotation. We're just thinking about this card in and of itself, maybe with other rogue secrets, etc. Just pretend rogue secrets are all a thing and they work well, and consider this in that context. And I like this one. Now, I think a lot of people are going to say, oh my gosh, Regis, that's really limited in its scope. It only takes control of stealth minions. It's a really limited target. Like, it's going to whiff 99% of the time, most decks. But keep in mind, two things. One, just because there's nothing that's really high value stealth right now, it doesn't mean there won't always be. Imagine like a Ziliax style card that came around with stealth. Beyond that, think about things like spirits from Rastakhan's Rumble. If those are all buffed, say like we got the Boomsday Project buffs recently in the Rise of the Mechs, or if they just come into fashion, even Spirit of the Shark being played right now, suddenly a card like this makes a lot more sense. You can play it pre-spirit, you steal your opponent's spirit, you disrupt their game plan. Maybe you have some cool stuff to do on your own. That's the kind of tech card that's important to exist. So no, in most metas, this wouldn't be very good, but in the occasional meta, in the right scenario, this is a really nice little swing card. It's a lot of value, potentially, right? If you steal something from your opponent, you're both denying their minion, but also gaining your own. So if they play like a 3-mana minion, you steal it, that's like a 6-mana swing for a 2-mana card, and that's really good. And the bigger things get, the more upside there is there potentially as well. So beyond that, double agent and the artwork here, just perfect thematically from the fantasy, the storytelling of this card. It nails it, right? Because a double agent is a sneaky dude that then changes sides. So you have a double agent in your opponent's deck. That's wonderful. So great card here from a design standpoint, maybe limited in power level to some extent, but still, that's okay. That's how Hearthstone cards are sometimes, and this one gets a lot of other things right. Now let's talk about Shadow Enhancer from Red Stake, and this one targeted something that a lot of people attempted to do when submitting their cards, but I thought most of them were really scary, and that's permanent stealth. So we know permanent stealth from things like Dollar on Heist. You can get permanent stealth on minions. That is something that exists in Hearthstone, just not in constructed format. A lot of people design cards with permanent stealth. It made me super nervous because it was like too low curve, or there was some combo potential, or you could just like buff them a ton and it would get really scary. Shadow Enhancer, though, I like because it takes the permanent stealth and it kind of moves it onto a second minion. So, for instance, this is an 8-mana 6/8 big high-cost minion, so that's good first off, right? Anything that's powerful, the more high-cost it is, the more balanced it feels. But it reads your minions with stealth have permanent stealth, so you have to keep your Shadow Enhancer alive for that permanent stealth to matter. So your opponent has a way to address the permanent stealth aspect because of the Shadow Enhancer itself. Now, granted, if you can give the Shadow Enhancer stealth and you've got some stuff going on that's a little bit scarier, there are still answers to things like that with like Twisting Nethers and Brawls, for instance, right? So there are still checks on that power level. But I like that Red Stake here created a card that's more of a follow-up and more of a situational thing, and it requires some dedicated support to probably work well. And for the record, I don't think this would be a great card from a power level standpoint. But again, that's okay. Not every Hearthstone card is. I like cards that consider that aspect a little bit. But there might still be some ridiculous potential with a card like this. I don't know exactly what's possible. Maybe somebody out there could think of a cool combo that sets up some sort of scenario that really causes your opponent problems. And that's good. A complicated combo that has a check on its power level that still feels balanced, that is a sign of good design. And a card like this allows us to play with that permanent stealth mechanic in, I think, a much more safe and fair way than a lot of other designs did. Now let's take a look at Night Stalker for Mr. Geddes. This is a 4-mana 4/4 rogue minion with stealth. And it also reads, whenever your opponent draws a card, reveal it. So we've got here, the kind of perfect idea of like a spy, a stealthy person who's hanging around, scouting things out, doing a little reconnaissance. And in this case, we're seeing what our opponent is drawing. And this does have stealth that lasts. It's not stealth for one turn. So you can choose to never attack with this minion and just gain a resource knowledge advantage over the course of the game, like 4 or 5 turns, however long you leave it there, however long it's alive, you're gaining that informational advantage. But you're doing it at a trade-off, right? You've spent 4 mana, you kind of wasted a 4/4 that's sitting on board, so you have this balancing act. Do I attack with this thing? Do I need to use that tempo now? or do I care more about knowing what my opponent has? And based on the matchup, based on the game, based on the scenario, that could really change. And I like that there's some decision making there. And your opponent might also like feel desperate to answer something like this, or maybe they just leave it because they don't care. So there's this friction and there's some decision making on both sides of the board, which is good for Hearthstone. And, it's important that this had a reasonable stat total for a 4-mana minion. You didn't want it to be great. You didn't want it to be too bad either, because it may not be worth it. This still might be a decent minion just as a 4/4 stealth sometimes. Like, there might be scenarios, that Coppertail Imposter sort of thing, where some reason this is fine in a future meta. So I think a lot of the things got nailed with this card as far as cost and stats and effect. It feels like it's pretty much perfectly balanced to me, although I'm sure somebody out there is going to say it's too good compared to things like Coppertail Imposter. I don't think it is. I think it hits the marks pretty well in my mind, but of course, always curious to hear thoughts from smarter people out there in the YouTube comments. So now let's move on to Patriarch from Scarla. And I guess this card probably made it because I just like the name so darn much. It's such a good name. Patriarch, the fatherly figure of the treants here, so he's a Patriarch. Intentional misspelling, obviously. 5 mana, 3/6 druid minion. Your treants have stealth. So I love the storytelling on this card, right? You've got this big protective tree, fatherly figure, some sort of ancient that's protecting the little treants. They're hiding in his branches, they're hiding behind him, so naturally they have stealth. I think that's such a cool idea. Taunt in some ways would tell the same story, but for some reason the stealth aspect, I like that the idea of them hiding in the branches. It feels just so much more natural to me. Some pun intended there with the word natural. But anyway, this is a cool idea for a follow-up card for something like Token Druid, right? Like you've got this treant synergy package going on already in a lot of Token Druid decks, or pretty much all of them except the mech builds, which still have some Soul of the Forest action. So why not give you a card that maybe helps protect your board against certain things, and maybe not all kinds of AoEs, but against minion-based decks. Say, like, for instance, Zoo Warlock, which is a weakness for a lot of Token Druid builds, because they just take really favorable trades. Magic Carpet wreaks havoc on your board. A card like this would help you deny that minion trade so that you could set up for a really nice Savage Roar, Blessing of the Ancients, whatever. Now, I think some people will say, oh, that's a little too good, Regis. Like, you can protect a board so that you're always guaranteed to get off your big, super wide board damage Savage Roar turn. I don't think that's true because cards just like Flame Strike and Blizzard and Warpath still exist, and this card doesn't really solve the AoE removal problem. It only really solves the minion trading problem. So there is a little bit of an opportunity cost here, because if it's an AoE meta, you wouldn't care about a card like this. So it's only good in certain sorts of scenarios, environments. So I like that aspect, that it has a limit, but it's still powerful in certain kinds of scenarios. And beyond that, just a great name and a great story, so a great card. Up next here, I have the Mindbreaker Sarael from Sadathar, and this is a neutral minion, 5 mana, 4/6, with a cool start of game effect. If your deck has equal taunt and stealth keywords, then swap those cards' keywords this game. Now, I don't think the wording here is absolutely perfect for this card, but I really, really like the effect, so I'm willing to look a little beyond it. So essentially any card that has stealth or taunt has that stealth and taunt switch. So there's a couple examples provided here by Sadathar. The Black Knight, for instance, would read destroy an enemy minion with stealth. Now, I don't know how that one would work specifically. Kind of a weird example because you can't target stealth minions with a battle cry, so maybe it'd be random in this case. I don't know. That's a little iffy, but we got the Streetwise Investigator, which makes a lot more sense. Enemy minions lose taunt, right? Instead of losing stealth, which it normally does, they lose taunt, and that's really cool. But, I mean, this is two very specific examples in a world where there's like a million options because of taunt cards. Think about all the different taunt cards that might get stealth, right? And that's a suddenly really cool thing. But keep in mind, you can't just run like all taunt cards. You have to also run some cards that have the keyword stealth because they have to have equal numbers of keywords. So you can't just build some super awesome taunt deck where everything has stealth forever. That doesn't work. You gotta also add some stealth stuff in that randomly has taunt. And I think most minions that are designed to have stealth, getting taunt makes them weak. So there's like some minions that are awesome, some minions that are bad. And I haven't really thought through all the possible combinations here. Maybe there's something broken. I don't know, you tell me. But the idea of building a deck like this and trying to meet that requirement while also designing something that works and has a game plan sounds like so much freaking fun. Like, I kind of just want to do it anyway, just because it sounds really cool, even though this isn't a real card. Like, it'd be fun to try to build a deck list that's like, okay, this works really well because of all these swapped keywords. And these two, these two examples here are more on the kind of battle cry or synergy side of things, but there's also just a lot of raw taunt and stealth minions. You could have your Silverback Patriarch 1/4 stealth. Your dreams are coming true. But I just like the idea here, right? A fun start of game effect that requires you to really focus in on deck building and takes two mechanics that are kind of diametrically opposed with one another, and that makes it really, really fun in my mind. So now let's take a look at Captain Fogbeard from Rafam's Apprentice, a 4-mana 2/2 pirate. Scary looking pirate at that. Stealth for 1 turn, but also Battlecry and Death Rattle give adjacent minions stealth for 1 turn as well. And cool story on this card, right? Great fantasy. You've got this pirate that's a fog-centered pirate. Obviously, his name is Fogbeard after all. And he's bringing in the fog on his boat, right? So when he comes in, he's fog. When he dies, he dissipates some fog, I guess, or emanates some fog, I should say. So he's giving all these other minions stealth, but it's fog. So, it does dissipate after a while, and it only gets it for 1 turn. So really cool story there. Now, as far as balance for this card is concerned, right? I like the idea of giving things a limited amount of stealth. It's kind of like a conceal on a stick, right? It's attached to a minion. So is that good? I have no idea. I mean, it's, if I'm looking at like Defender of Argus, it's kind of the same as Defender of Argus with a Death Rattle added in. Similar stat line, Pirate Synergies, it feels like it could be good, right? Just like getting a board that sticks, some value minion you just want to keep around, giving your Spirit of the Shark additional stealth for another turn, right? For instance, there are all kinds of scenarios where if you build a deck around this, some kind of aggressive pirate deck, I'm sure giving your minion stealth would be a good thing, just to deny pings, deny minion trades. So yeah, even though the stats are certainly pretty poor here for a 4-drop, I think it could still work in the right kind of pirate sort of deck. So it seems like it's balanced. It doesn't seem too good to me, but it also seems playable, and that means it's a pretty nifty little legendary for Rogue. And then finally, one last card here. It's the Spell-Tapped Mage from PVT. 3-mana, 1/5, neutral minion, Battlecry. If you have no spells in your hand, gain stealth. And I think a lot of people say this card's kind of weak. It's just a 1/5 on turn 3. It's like got stealth, but who cares? And then somebody might come along and say, well, you could Blessing of Kings it, Regis. It's turn 3 into turn 4. It's perfect. But then I'll tell you, well, if you have Blessing of Kings in hand, it's not going to have stealth. So there are some challenges using this card, but let me tell you why I like it. First off, feels like an incredibly realistic Hearthstone card. Like, not every card has to be super good in these videos. Some of them are overpowered, some of them are weaker, right? I'm more thinking about design. This feels super realistic. Beyond that, the name and the artwork and the effect are perfectly combined. You have a mage here who has, been fighting, slinging spells like crazy. Suddenly they're out of spells. So what do? They go hide behind a rock with this orc standing behind it, this scary orc coming. So it just tells the exact story of the card, and that's so wonderful. I love cards like that. If you have spells, this mage is out there fighting. If you don't, she's hiding, and that is just perfect for cards. Like, I think that gets you so many bonus points in my mind when it tells such a good story like that. So no, not the strongest card in the game by any means. I don't even know exactly who'd play it. Maybe somebody with a big turn 4 buff kind of card like Defender of Argus, or even better, right, in a future meta. But it doesn't matter because it's just so good. It feels so realistic. It feels like Hearthstone. And that to me makes it a wonderful choice for a video like this. And there you go, folks. That wraps it up for the stealth custom cards this time around. Lots of cool designs, as always. Thank you guys for submitting those. Now, next up, we have beasts. I want you to design a beast minion. It has to be a minion, and it has to be a beast. Don't care about the class. Don't care about the rarity. As long as it's a minion and a beast, it can go in the next video. So give me your best beast-themed design. I don't know what it is. Use some famous lore character. Use some cool new mechanic. Whatever you want, just submit it using the link in the description below. But until then, share your thoughts on these cards in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, game on.